Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Monday, the 12th of August, 2013. Thanks for joining me today. Let's take a look at what's going on across the Atlantic. Now, while it says no tropical cyclones at this time, you have to dig a little deeper. Click on the Tropical Weather Outlook link, and there are more clues for you right here in the paragraph that they write up. Remember, there is the 2-day outlook mentioned in the first part of the text, and then the potential for 5-day development has been added recently, and we see that there's pretty much 0% of chances of development over the next 48 hours, but 20% chance of some development over the next 5 days. Confusing? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Eventually, hopefully, it'll all just be a 5-day forecast. We'll wait and see how that turns out. What are they talking about, though? Well, let's take a look first at the full Atlantic Basin shot. First of all, this area is a large gyre of low pressure, just a fancy word for a large area of spin or vorticity over the Atlantic here. Very dry air still persisting across the Atlantic, the tropical Atlantic anyway, and that is keeping this from becoming anything more than just a large swirl of clouds. It's a very large envelope of energy, that's for sure, and had it had available moisture with it and instability was more favorable, this would probably already be a tropical storm. But what the Hurricane Center is talking about is a combination of a tropical wave and another gyre of low pressure that sits in the Caribbean, very typical this time of year, sort of combining to end up with something trying to develop and move off in this direction, maybe bringing some kind of a hybrid system up towards the central Gulf Coast towards the end of the week. The GFS model, fairly persistent at showing this happening, but it's not very strong, and it may not be purely tropical. There's a front, cold front, a trough that's going to drop in up here, and the system may interact with that front, get drawn to the north and east, and not be entirely tropical in nature. Very strong southwest winds coming, and that may induce what's called baroclinic forcing, so that the way that you're getting clouds, showers, and thunderstorms and wind and low pressure may not be purely tropically driven by deep convection, but rather energy added by the atmosphere itself. Complex? Yes, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. The good news, none of the global computer models indicating anything substantial, but there could be a pretty impressive rain event coming out of it, so stay tuned. We'll be talking about that throughout the rest of the week. In the Eastern Pacific, things staying very busy as we have another area out here at 80% now of development. It's funny, they say 70%. Again, I guess this is the... See, it already fooled me. 70% in the next 48 hours and 80% in the next 5 days. That's pretty funny. You have to read and really understand what you're looking at. So this will probably develop, take a satellite shot, look at that, and head on out to the west into the open Pacific and not really bother anybody. A couple of other disturbances off the coast of Mexico and Central America. Very, very active pattern here, not so much in the Atlantic. Kind of a strange pattern considering the Atlantic Basin is supposed to be very, very busy this year. We'll see if things start to pick up later in the month. I suspect that they will. Couple things to look at on this Monday. First, climatology for this next 10 days that we're moving through, August 11th through the 20th. The Atlantic Basin starts to get much more active between Africa and the Lesser Antilles, and then the Caribbean, mainly in the Northwest Caribbean, getting pretty active at this time frame. The Gulf staying that way. Southwest Atlantic, its usual areas of development that have happened over the past 100 years or so. Some of those from stalled frontal boundaries, some of those from tropical waves, some of those from upper level lows that made their way down to the surface. But this area right here, this big concentration just east of the islands, is interesting to note because now we're starting to really pick up the activity, and you'll see that this will really fill in as we get to the last third of the month. This is climatology. This is what has happened in the past and is not always a predictor of the future, but normally statistics usually work out that eventually you would think we're going to get a hurricane. The first hurricane is supposed to occur on average by August the 10th. So we're a couple of days past due of seeing the first hurricane develop in the Atlantic. Probably not too many people complaining that we haven't had that. Looking at sea surface temperatures for this time frame, August 12th, the latest update here, still pretty warm across the deep tropics here compared to average, warming up in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're starting to lose these cool anomalies that were sitting around off the coast of Florida and in the southwest Atlantic, a sign that the pattern may be changing. But boy, look at these cold anomalies along the equator in the Pacific, all the way out into the central Pacific, cooler than average, a sign of that cold neutral phase that we're going through, almost a La Nina, the abnormal cooling of the Pacific. And notice, because of all the tropical storm activity up here in the eastern Pacific between Baja and Hawaii, to give you some references there, much colder anomalies right there, probably 4 to 5 degrees Celsius below the average, due to those tropical storms and hurricanes forming one after the other in the Pacific. The other thing I wanted to show you, I thought this was interesting, the tropical cyclone heat potential for today, or yesterday. It's updated every couple of days. This is the measure of how much ocean heat potential exists beyond just the surface of the ocean, but further down at depth, 50, 100, 200 meters or more. And you notice lots of very warm water here in the western basin, but it's also starting to increase the heat content even out here in the tropical Atlantic just off the Cape Verde Islands. And that'll start to add more moisture and instability to the atmosphere slowly but surely. And we're going to reach the peak of the heat content building over the next few weeks. And we haven't had any hurricanes to disturb the ocean, so lots of high octane fuel out there for hurricanes to take advantage of. Luckily, and so far, there haven't been any hurricanes to do so. When that'll change, well, we'll have to just wait and see together. Alright, well, things look quiet for the rest of the week except for what may develop out of the Caribbean. Again, it looks weak, more of a rainmaker and maybe a little bit of a gale center, if you will, than anything else. Could be a subtropical storm. We'll wait and see what happens with that. You never know. Those Gulf water temps are very warm, and all it takes is enough organization, and you can get a tropical storm to spin up fairly quickly. So we'll keep an eye on that on a daily basis as we move through the next several days. Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. That's my site. Check it out if you haven't already. And always a privilege here. I appreciate being able to do these videos for Hurricane Pro in HD. Have yourselves a great rest of your Monday. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.